This is Ask Joe number
166.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Home Studio Corner podcast. My name is Joe Gilder, and I'm really glad you're here listening to me, hopefully on this Monday morning. Big shout out to the folks on Periscope who are joining me live. And I've said this a few weeks now, but this episode might actually be on YouTube. I tried it last time, but for some reason the video didn't record because I'm not smart. But this time I think it's working, so I think I might be able to post this to YouTube as well as to the normal podcast channel as well. More ways to consume this, and who knows, I may even put up a video podcast, but I'll probably just do YouTube and maybe Facebook video for now and see how that works. See if anybody watches it. We'll go from there. Because I don't know why people would want to look at my mug when you could just listen to my lovely voice and not have to take the visual. But anyway, those are my thoughts. So today I want to talk about, I missed last week, just a lot of things came up and didn't get an episode in. I should have a couple this week. I haven't put them all on the calendar. I just put this one on today because I knew I wanted today to happen. But I should be able to get at least another one, maybe two in this week. If you are inclined to listen to these as I stream them live, then head over to homestudiocorner.com/calendar, or you can just follow me over on Twitter, and I usually post when I'm doing those there as well. But the calendar will let you subscribe to see when I'm doing these things. I see I've got one more on the calendar for Thursday at 2 p.m., and I might throw another one in there earlier. So fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. But I wanted to get this one in Monday morning, kick things off well, and I hope you're up to having a good week. So what I want to talk about today is something that's been on my mind a lot, and I've talked about it a fair amount recently. I talked about it to my VIP members, to a training I did last month. I'm probably going to talk about it at an upcoming event I'm going to be a part of, which, by the way, if you haven't heard about this, I'm doing an event out in California, and it's a very inexpensive one-day event where me, Graham Cochran, Ronan Chris Murphy, and Ian Shepard, along with a bunch of guest panelists, professional audio folk, are going to be doing basically a one-day seminar where we're going to do panels and interviews and talks and things like that. So I'm very excited about that. It'll be March 6th, 2016, and it's happening out in Los Angeles. I believe it's in the Santa Monica area. So if you want to check that out and then you think you can make it, tickets are, I believe the most tickets will be is maybe $27 or $37, so they're not much, and the price increases as you get closer to the date. But there are a limited amount of seats. We're going to be in a theater, and I don't think we're sold out yet. So check that out at audiobloggerslive.com. All the proceeds go to charity, and Chris Murphy, Ronan Chris Murphy, is the one who put all this together. So big kudos to him, and thank you for letting me be a part of it, my friend. Also, for those of you listening who weren't here live, that intro was done using the Avid 11 rack and a microphone. You can plug a mic into the front and sing through different amp models, which is super fun, and I don't do enough of that, so maybe more of that will come down the road. All right, so without more blabbing from me, what I want to talk about today is something that is, I hesitate to talk about it because it is a bit personal, but I found when I open up about stuff I'm dealing with, people always come out of the woodworks and say, hey, that was really helpful, or I really appreciate you sharing that. Blah. Anyway, so today, it's actually very fitting for today. I almost canceled today's episode because I was just having a rough day. And I tend to struggle with some anxiety and some depression, and which I've never really talked about ever. And it's one of those things that goes through cycles, and some days I just literally everything that I want to do that given day, even if it's small things like today, I'll give you a very real example. A month and a half ago, I sent an email out to my VIP members saying, hey, I want to do some changes to the VIP members area. I want to know what I can do to make it better. And I've dropped the ball on these things, and I'm sorry about that. And I've got these ideas for the future. I'd love your feedback. And I got a good chunk of them sent replies back. So I had a big bunch of emails I put into a folder to read in one sitting to get some feedback on what it is they want, what they're thinking, all that stuff. And so this morning I was going to sit down for an hour and read through those and then make some decisions about moving forward. And I literally felt like I couldn't get through reading them. I would read one email, and they weren't mean emails either. They weren't saying, "Oh, Joe, you're horrible, and this is why VIP is so lame." These were all really nice people giving really good suggestions, and mostly just saying how much they enjoyed stuff. And even so, for whatever reason, I had a lot of anxiety and fear just about sitting down and reading those. I would read one, and then I would have to get up and walk around and literally pace the room to kind of calm down to read the next one. So I know there are lots of factors at play, and I do not want to begin to pretend like I understand the workings of the brain and the chemical imbalances that can cause a lot of that. But on a very practical level, we all deal with fear and anxiety on some level. Maybe not to the point of needing medicine for it, but we can get all worked up about stuff, and it can start to seem insurmountable. It can start to seem as if you'll never be able to do this simple thing you want to do. So for you, maybe it's sit down and finish that song, or maybe it's sit down and begin that mix, or finally finish that mix, or work through one of my programs and use the tracks that I provide and actually do the work and get in the practice. Whatever it is, I feel like in the past, I've been very much all about get it done, get it done, get it done. And I've talked about it on this podcast and in various other formats, the importance of just getting in and doing it. But I just want to acknowledge that sometimes the mere act of getting in and doing it can be really difficult and can feel almost impossible. And I just want you to know that I understand, and that sucks. It really does. And for me, thankfully, it's not an everyday thing, but it has been more of a theme the last few years of me getting to a point of almost having to just not do any work on a given day because this anxiety builds up. And so for me, personally, I don't know if there's a point to this, if I'm going to give you a nice 2-minute tie it all together and make everything right again. But for me, I'm here doing this episode, and I'm glad to be here. I'm actually glad. I have a smile on my face to do this because I really enjoy doing this. I really enjoy making music. I really enjoy helping you. And I had to kind of get past these kind of irrational fears and get to that. But I couldn't do it on my own. So I've got a group of friends, and I tell them when I'm feeling crazy, because I literally feel crazy. And I will, my wife obviously is my best friend, and I told her first, but to have friends who are standing with me, even though they're at their jobs and doing their stuff today, and my wife who's gone with the kids to the zoo, but to know that they are aware of what's going on with me and even praying for me and able to just know, just even empathize with me, not even offer solutions. It's a pretty big deal, pretty powerful. So between doing that and a few other things, I feel a lot better, and I feel like I'm able to. But right before I shot this video or shot this podcast episode, I was sitting down reading those emails, enjoying them, and able to kind of function. So all this to say, if I've ever said something along the lines of, you just need to hunker down, man up, as they say, woman up, and just get it done. And if that's come across offensive to you, I'm sorry. Not in the sense that I don't ever want to offend anybody, but I can see how I've been a little more callous towards people who have a really hard time just getting in and functioning on doing seemingly simple things. Productivity is not the most important thing, but there's a lot of joy that can come from finding ways to face down your fears instead of running away. Part of me wanted to just go to Starbucks and randomly surf the internet for mindless things all day, rather than getting in here and doing work that I know matters and makes a difference and is something I really do truly want to do. So I don't have lots of advice on how to face those fears and what that means, but I just want you to know, if you find yourself in that position, it's okay. I feel like it's a part of the human experience, and it probably makes you pretty stinking normal. So that's it for the rant/soliloquy for today. Been a weird one thus far, but I'm kind of excited to get past this and move into your questions. Boom. Okay, that went in a different direction than I was expecting it to go. But if you have questions for me, I might be changing some of this in the future. You can ask them for the podcast over at askjoegilder.com. Right now, that takes you to a place to fill out a form. In the near future, it might take you to a different place to fill out a form. But the best way to ask questions is on places like Twitter and Facebook. You can find me there, Joe Gilder Music. And there's a hashtag you can use, Ask Joe Gilder, to allow me to see your questions, and that's where I pull a lot of the questions as well. So one thing I want to talk about too, I meant to talk about this on this episode for the beginning section, but I didn't. But if you haven't checked out my latest article I wrote on a new website, I believe the link might still be broken, but if you go to roadtotheryman.com, there I set up a Tumblr website, which is at joegildermusic.tumblr.com, where I talked about this idea of this goal that I want to play the Ryman. And I've had this goal for a while. Ryman Auditorium is a really cool venue here in Nashville. I've had this goal for a while, but I've not done much to move towards it, especially in the last 6 months or so. So anyway, it's a good read. Go check it out. I'll let you figure out the rest from there. So here's a question from Gabe Miller over on Twitter. And what's cool about Gabe Miller, he's been, I think he's been a VIP member, a Dueling Mixes member in the past, and he's going to be at the event in California next month, which I'm super excited to finally meet you in person. Gabe, he says, what are some techniques you use to speed up your workflow and be more efficient in the studio? Man, that's the $1 million question, because so much of what we do in the studio is boring and time consuming. And for a lot of people, especially musicians, that can be a real session killer. If it takes you forever to do something and they're sitting there ready and waiting to perform and to do their thing, and you're dawdling around trying to figure out how to put a reverb on, that can really, if not kill the session, just kill the vibe and make things just go painfully slow. So for me, efficiency is something I had to learn by watching other people. So for example, if I go to a PreSonus event where they do some in Nashville occasionally, they've done a couple at Ben Folds' studio here, which is the old RCA Studio B, I believe. And sometimes they'll be doing a session on Studio One, which is the software that I use that is on my screen right now recording this episode. And a lot of times they will, just watching somebody work and even doing one or two things, I'll see things that intrigue me, or I'll see the way he does this, which is a way that takes him 3 steps to do it, or it takes him 1 step to do it as opposed to the 3 steps that I use to take it. So it's never really one big, massive thing that I do that changes my workflow entirely and saves me hours and hours of time. It's lots of those little things. For example, things like having the session set up beforehand. If you know you're going to be adding reverbs and delays, go ahead and have those auxiliary tracks set up with the plugins on there ready to be routed to, as opposed to having to bring those in on the fly. If you're recording a vocalist and you have a good idea that he or she is probably going to want to record themselves singing the melody, but then also some harmony and background vocal tracks, already have those tracks created, or have a way of quickly creating and duplicating the track without having to waste a bunch of time. Because once they're in the zone singing wise, they want to start knocking out, or at least a lot of musicians, I'm the same way. Once I'm in that mode, I want to start knocking things out as quickly as possible. So a practical example of that, if I'm coming to your studio to sing, and we've set up the mics, we've set up preamps, we've gotten a good tone, we've gotten through that part of it, the necessary part of picking out the mic and getting good tone. When it's time for me to lay down a performance, I want to be able to do that quickly. So here's an example of how to kill the session. So let's say we start singing, I get through the first verse, and I stop you and say, hey, can you add some reverb? Ideally, you would say, yeah, 1 second, click, click, click. All right, how's that? That's a little too much. Can you turn it down? Okay, how's that? Perfect, let's go. And you hit record. That interchange takes 15 seconds. And you look like a pro, and the singer can get back to singing. As opposed to, hey, can I get some reverb? Yeah, 1 second. Hang on. No, okay, let's see. Hall room plate. Yeah, we'll go with that. Okay, now let me click this. Now let me send from your vocal to the reverb. Okay, let me route that now. Okay, how's that? Do you see how that would, if you're the musician, you're sitting there tapping your foot, staring at the ceiling, super awkward because it's taking them this long to do it. Now, I'm way more judgmental than the average singer because I know how to do things quickly. So if I'm sitting there and I'm the artist and I see that you're taking 10 hours to do a very simple, quick thing. I struggle to be patient with that in my head. I'm like, just click there and get it done. So that's just a quick example of how that can, if you imagine doing that times 10 different events over the course of a vocal session, you've really kind of killed the vibe. And so those are the kind of things I think about. When it comes to editing and mixing, are there keyboard shortcuts that allow me to do this repetitive task more quickly? If I can do it by clicking one thing versus clicking 3 things, that's great. If I can do it by hitting a button instead of clicking, that's great. But again, it's not going to save you, one of these is not going to save you hours and hours, but you might save a little bit with a handful of them. And once you do that, you can kind of work from there, and you start to see yourself being a little bit quicker as you go. But it's all about putting in a lot of time and looking for ways to get quick. Don't be obsessed with it, but if you feel like you're slow on something, there's a good chance you probably are, and there's probably a quicker way to go about it. And you can probably find a video on YouTube that'll show you, hey, here's a quicker way to do this. Add those up over time, and suddenly you find yourself as a much quicker, more efficient engineer. Johnny Lipsham, my good buddy from Scotland, says, do you have any advice for dealing, my speakers just made a weird sound. Do you have any, turn them off. Do you have any advice for blah, 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 for mixing a saxophone section? 2 altos, 2 tenors, and a baritone. I don't know, Johnny, I know you do a lot of jazz, so I'm guessing any sort of fun effect like a slapback delay, probably not going to work. When I've done horns before, specifically saxophones, I've loved the sound of putting a slapback delay on them. It gives them this space and kind of smears it out a little bit so they're not quite as harsh and in your face, gives them a little bit of, it backs them away a little bit. But in a lot of ways, saxophones are a lot like the human voice. So I would say, how would you treat 2 altos, 2 tenors, and a bass singer? And the answer is you probably have a couple ideas that come to mind when I say that. The first thing I would try, because I like the laziest, simplest approach, would be to route all of them to a stereo bus and try to use EQ there to get them to sit where I want them to sit. Probably don't need compression, I would imagine, if they're good players. And then if that doesn't work, if there's too many variations in tone that can't be captured by that, then I would maybe route the baritone or put an EQ on the baritone and kind of EQ that separately. And then maybe route the 2 altos together to a bus, the 2 tenors together to a bus, and EQ them as one track together. And then the panning is going to make a big difference. Do you pan the altos and tenors hard left and right away from each other? So the 2 tenors are to the left and the 2 altos are to the right? Or do you pan 1 tenor left, 1 tenor right, 1 alto left, 1 alto right? Typically, I tend to default to that mode of if there's 2 of them, pan them hard left and right. But depending on, now, I would definitely try both options of panning both tenors to the left, both altos to the right to see what works better. You might find you get better separation and a better sound by having them be on top of each other, both panned one side or the other. Those are some things I would think about, but without hearing it and being in the mix, I don't know if I could offer anything else other than maybe some reverb might work. Here's a question over from Periscope from, I believe it's Basden, and I just lost it. See, this is why I don't love Periscope, because the question disappears. It pops up and disappears. So ask it again, and I will answer it. But in the meantime, I'll go to one of the email questions and take a few of those. Here's one a while back from my buddy Steve Parkins from Australia, and he's talking about what the K system is for monitoring. How it works, and is it worth using? I've talked about this before, but it's worth talking about again. If you've ever seen any of my videos where I'm doing any mixing or mastering, you'll probably notice on my master fader, there is, the meter looks different than everything else. Typically on a system, you'll have a meter that's jumping up and down, and it just kind of goes with the peaks. In Studio One, the default mode for the meter is a peak/RMS meter, which essentially means it shows you the peaks, and then it has a white line that kind of shows you the average level of the audio. So the average volume of what's coming through plus the peaks that are jumping above that. The K system is essentially a way of monitoring more the average volume of the mix. So instead of having the peaks over there, you'll see this very smooth moving meter that just moves up and down with the average volume. So it doesn't jump around nearly as much because it's averaging all the sounds together. And the whole idea with the K system is there's different places where kind of your 0 point is. So there's K20, K14, and K12. For me, I do all my mixing at K20, all my mastering at K14. That means at the -14 spot, is it -14 or is it -7? Anyway, basically the meter stays green until it gets to 0, and then it goes into a yellow mode, and then it goes into red. And to me, and the way I've heard it explained is if you're doing mixing, if you keep the signal right around that green and yellow spot on your master fader, you probably have good gain staging and you're not relying on a lot of compression or limiting to keep you from clipping, essentially. You have plenty of headroom and typically plenty of dynamics because you're not reverting to a lot of compression to make up for the fact that your tracks keep clipping on your mix bus, okay? And then for mastering, K14 seems to be right where on the loudest parts of the song, it's hitting the yellow and the red, but for the most part, it's hanging out in the low yellow and the green, and that's where I get the bulk of my level. It keeps me from over mastering things, from making them too loud just for the sake of being loud, when that might not be beneficial to the actual sound of the master. That's probably a horrible explanation, and I apologize for that, Steve. It's a really good question. It's just hard to explain without showing it, so I feel like I've done a video. I can't remember if it was on YouTube or on VIP, but somebody let me know, and I'll try to make that happen if I don't have one for sure. I got time for one more question if anybody on Periscope wants to ask one. Here's one. It says, how do you get inspiration for a song without copying it, or inspiration from a song? How do you get inspiration from a song without copying it? I would say in some ways you are copying some elements of it, and it's kind of unavoidable. Maybe you'll copy the instrumentation, so drums, bass, 2 electric guitars, and acoustic, or you're copying the time signature. You like a 4/4 groove that sounds like this, or you're copying kind of the vibe of the rhythm and things like that. I think there's always some copying happening. For example, my song, what's it called? I hear music in my head from the podcast. I can't hear this song. Anyway, it sounds like I completely ripped off a Sarah Bareilles song. The song is called, what is it? I didn't know better. Told Me So. It's called Told Me So. And the beginning has this exact same first bar of a piano part with the syncopated rhythm as that Sarah Bareilles song, Not Gonna Write You a Love Song. Now, I didn't mean to do that. I wasn't thinking about her when I wrote it, but clearly that was influencing my decision. And potentially copyright infringement, I don't know. It's a very small part. But anyway, I'm out of time. I gotta go. Hope that helped.